She's going to join us. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead. We had initially planned on making folks live, so we're going to kind of roll with it. We wanted it to be a little bit more interactive. We thought we could put people on stage like in Zoom, and we may not be able to do it quite that way. So we will keep conversation going in the chat. So where this whole workshop came from is like, and I have on my CSEdWeek t-shirt, and you guys probably have yours too. So we have that hashtag, right? CS for social justice, but what does that mean actually for the computer science class? And that's where the impetus for this session came from. So what does it look like? Okay, yay. So I'm Tonya Davis, and I am one of the Houston regional managers for Microsoft Philanthropies TEALS. And if you've not heard about TEALS, in short, we are a organization that recruits software professionals to volunteer in high school classrooms for twofold. One, to support teachers as they are coming over to the CS content area, maybe perhaps from other content areas like math, science, social studies, wherever. The person who said, I'll do it, I want to make sure my kids have access and I'm willing to try it. So we support those teachers who are new to the content area. And then simultaneously, of course, while volunteers are in the classroom, then they are supporting students and providing that visual, that representation of, yes, these are real people who do these jobs. And so that's what we do. The volunteers come into the class like teachers or TAs, depending on the skill level of the actual classroom teacher, and they support the curricular. So it's during the school day when the computer science class is offered. I have taught CS. I was a math teacher for 4 years, and then taught CS for 3 years. I actually do have an undergrad degree in computer science and worked in industry for a number of years. So working with TEALS gives me an opportunity to merge all of my experiences, and I'm thrilled to work in this space. Marilyn's going to introduce herself, and then she'll go from there.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. My name is Marilyn Bekolo. I am the newest Houston Regional Manager here at the
You know what I just realized?
Huh?
I can't hear.
Oh, you can't hear me either? No. Can y'all put like a 1 in the chat or a thumbs up if you can hear me? Okay. Okay, someone, yeah. All right, awesome. Tonya, you can't hear me? Aww. Okay, I guess we're having a little bit of technical difficulties on her end, but we'll definitely wrap that up. So my name is Marilyn Bekolo. I am the newest Houston Regional Manager here in the Southwest region. So I started off my career working at Accenture, so their systems integration division with the Department of Defense. So got that job right out of graduating from Howard University in DC. Moved on to work at Google at their headquarters in the Bay Area, California. While I was there, I focused on legal operations and Google for education. So worked with a lot of the K-12 education leaders across the nation, as well as internationally. And through that opportunity, I was super excited to learn more about the public sector. So I left that opportunity to join Education Pioneers, which is basically a fellowship that allows folks who are coming from the corporate space to really immerse themselves in the social sector. So that allowed me to work at a school district here in Houston, which was an amazing opportunity to engage with teachers and students. I worked on some strategic planning and diversity and inclusion initiatives. And then from there, worked at an education startup, and then always had a passion for CS education and awareness. In the past, I volunteered with Black Girls Code, Technovation, so it just made it make sense for me to join Microsoft TEALS and really support computer science awareness, especially in marginalized communities. So that's a little bit about myself. We're going to try to bring Tonya back on. Tonya, can you, I see the thumbs up. I'm going to see if I can try to troubleshoot this. If y'all can give us maybe a few moments to do so.
Okay.
All right, awesome.
I see my settings again, but where's the presentation? Sorry.
No, it's okay. Well, as if y'all already know, being in the Zoom era, there's always going to be a little bit of glitches. So thank you for your patience, everyone.
There we go.
Awesome.
Okay.
So yeah, so we wanted to start off to really bridge the gap of what's happening in the corporate sector to what's also happening in the social sector. So these are just a few companies that are truly leading the way of diversity and inclusion and equity initiatives within their company. So there's a list of the top 50, and this is coming from Diversity Inc. But we really wanted to highlight that in terms of really making sure that we are running our organizations, whether that be in the public sector or social sector, it's always best to always touch on best practices, right? So if someone's doing it really well in another industry or another company or another school district, how do we make sure that we're tapping into that knowledge of wealth? And then also applying that to what's happening in our own organization. So always customizing it, but always making sure that we are tapping into best practices across different industries.
Sorry.
Awesome. Next slide, please.
I thought it did. There we go.
Awesome. So for today, we wanted to touch on 5 major components. Number 1 would be really recognizing the shift in global understanding of diversity and inclusion. So depending on where you are in the world, it might mean something different. So how do we really apply that knowledge to what's happening in school systems? And with that, we really want to zero into diversity in enrollment. So that's in terms of the types of students that are enrolling in certain classes. And we've seen with computer science classes, unfortunately, there are certain student demographics that seem to be left out. So we really want to make sure that is an inclusive opportunity for all of our students. Number 2 is really building an inclusive environment. So when I walk into a classroom, what am I seeing? What am I hearing? Do I see posters that represent someone that looks like me? Do I hear examples of folks who other students may be able to relate to? So really making sure that it's not exclusive, but it's always inclusive of the different types of students that are in your classroom. And then really touching on the different practices that could be done. So as we think about inclusive instruction, what does that look like? How do we really apply that to more of the academic aspects of teaching and instruction? And then also, how do we make sure that all levels of management and leadership, they're fully in the loop and they're fully bought in? So from the classroom to the school, to the campus, to the district, these are all tiers that should be fully aligned as we attempt to implement this in a more effective way. And the last thing would be just really recognizing the different types of innovation that's possible within this space. So for some folks, this might be a new concept, right, where you're building awareness of diversity, but how do we make sure that we're continuing on that knowledge path of awareness and then empowerment and then advocacy, and all of that can be done through education reform, education policy, and as well as education innovation. Next slide, please. Yeah, Silicon Valley really is lacking. But, you know, I think this is a process where we can all work together and also hold each other accountable. So accountability is a big piece for me, and especially transparency. So, but we can dig into the data at another time. So as I mentioned before, there's really that global shift of like, how do we define D&I within your organization, within your country, within your district? So it means many different things. But as we're going to talk about this today, we really want to focus on the intersectionality between these different topic areas. So oftentimes when folks think about diversity, it's gender or ethnicity, but there's so many different elements to this. So yes, I could be a Black woman, but I could also be a Black woman who identifies as being in the LGBTQIA community. I could also be someone who is challenged in terms of physical disability. So how do we make sure that we are really taking the whole person and their very unique lived experiences and ensuring that we are meeting their needs, whether that's in the classroom, outside of the classroom? We really want to make sure that students and teachers alike feel very comfortable in the environments that they find themselves in. But actually, on this point, we'd love to hear anyone's experience with dealing with intersectionality, whether you want to get on stage or if you want to type in the chat. We'd just love to hear some stories or just anything that might come to mind when you think about this, this subject.
Yeah.
I know it's Saturday.
Well, and
might be kind of deep, but yeah, Tonya, if you want to.
Yeah, I was going to say,
yeah.
we had just a way to think about in this space, right? Understanding your demographics. We had a little activity, but wanted to, what we would have been doing is just thinking about your own experience. And what we train our volunteers, we have them go through this exercise when we do our summer training with our teachers, and they look at all their different backgrounds, right? And it kind of gives the perspective of where you're coming from, right? Because everybody sees or engages and interacts with others based upon their own personal lens. And so what we do in this particular activity is we highlight the varied backgrounds of everybody that's come to the table, right? And so even if you think, I think about some of my students that I've taught over the years, and some of them I've had similar backgrounds with, but others I really have had nothing in common with. And so that comes into play when you're in your work environment as well as when you're in the classroom. And so that's just one of those things that we like to highlight and emphasize when we do our training.
Yeah. Oh, lovely.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that was good. There we go.
So we have okay, awesome. I'm just going to read it out loud. So we have a comment in the chat. I work and live in a very white state. So I want to make sure that the voices I include in the classroom are inclusive and representative of people that our students may not necessarily see. I think that's a really, really valid point. So for me, I'm first generation American. My family is from Nigeria and Cameroon. So for me, anytime I had a teacher or a mentor or a counselor who could like tap into, have you ever heard of this Nigerian entrepreneur or this politician who's of the same descent, it always allowed me to really connect and feel like I was a part of what was happening in the moment. And that, of course, is unique to a lot of different students. So always making sure you're getting to know your students, right? Where they're not a number in the classroom, but you actually can relate to their lived experience and really where they're coming from and try to connect that to your instruction. So awesome.
And we know that as teachers, that's the key, right? It's about the relationship in the class. And so that is so very, very powerful.
Yes. Awesome. And then, so building an inclusive environment. So as I mentioned before, what you see and hear in the classroom is very, very important. Similar to like when we're communicating with each other, yes, what we're saying means a lot, but our nonverbal communication also has a lot of weight and value. And students really can like chime into that and have their own perception of like what's really going on, despite what you might be saying, based on how they're feeling or how they're really interpreting their physical environment. So the top thing we wanted to touch on would be visual representation. So again, what are some exclusionary signals that the student might be seeing? So if I walk into a classroom and I'm looking to learn about computer science, I'm enrolled in an AP CSA class, and I look up and all I see would be like white male engineers. I immediately think this is not the industry for me. It's not catered for me. If I look through my textbooks, it's the same thing. It's going to be hard for me to really tap into what's being taught and then the idea of me getting into that industry. So we touched on incorporating inclusive signals. So making sure when you're buying these different visual representations for your classrooms, are you really reflecting the student body? In terms of examples that you bring up in class, maybe touching on a specific language that a lot of the students may be well-versed in, whether that's Spanish or French, or if you're in Houston, there's a big Nigerian community, so Igbo or Yoruba. So really touching on different things. And then also a feedback loop. So the voices of our students, I think that's something that needs to be amplified. So as you're going through the semester, every once in a while, maybe pull a student to the side or like, give them a brief survey, just ask them some of those questions like, hey, like, is there anything we can do to make you feel more comfortable in this subject? Do you feel represented in what we're talking about? And if not, how can we improve that? So always making sure that you're having that connection and that communication signal with your students. And then another thing, you know, we want recognition. We want some type of acknowledgement, and so do our students. So make sure you're featuring student work within the classroom or like sending examples to other students. And I think that also touches on the influence that other students have on their peers, right? We're in a very social media influencer type of environment. So making sure that we're also highlighting that and seeing how that could be of value to motivate other students who may never have considered studying computer science or getting into a specific industry. But now that they see folks that look like them and that are in the same peer group as them, now they're more convinced. And then the other thing would be just really collaborating with other folks. So how do you arrange the seats in the classroom better, or even in Zoom meetings? If you have your breakout sessions with your students, how do you rearrange that so they're meeting different students and they're able to collaborate in different ways? And then also touching on accessibility. When we get back 100% into the classroom, how are we making sure that even the building or the classroom where students who may have some type of physical or mental challenge can also feel comfortable there? So whether that's the colors that you're using on slides, if someone is visually impaired, that's very important. If someone has hearing difficulty, making sure that you understand that and how to adapt to it while you're teaching your lesson. Awesome. Next slide.
Sorry, there we go.
No, you're fine. So I just want you all to just take a moment and look at these two pictures and kind of call out different things that you see that could
I'm gonna make it bigger.
Students' perception. Yeah.
Right. And I'm gonna make it bigger. So that yeah.
Awesome.
There you go.
So if you see anything, just call it out in the chat. Or if you want to unmute yourself, feel free to do that too.
Did we lose our audience?
No, they're there. It might be shy Saturdays, which is understandable. Awesome. Well, for me, I can see on the right side, you see the plant arrangements. I think even for my apartment, you see like a little, this is not real, it's a little bit fake, but it makes the environment warm for me, right? It makes me feel comfortable. Oh, you saw these pictures in the first session. Awesome. This suggests a space for nerdy boys. Exactly, yes. The one on the left, yes, I agree with that. Yes, Vicky, for sure. That is very true. So yeah, we talked about like the intersectionality of it all, but also thinking about personality types, right? Some students might be more artsy, right? So they might want to see more of a creative element. Other students may be more nature friendly. So like the plants may help them adjust better. So I think that's also very important, making sure you're thinking about the different personality types. And also linking that back to the subject area. I think a lot of students don't understand just because you're artsy, it doesn't mean you can't be in tech. No, there are a lot of art, design, career fields, whether that's graphic design, instructional design, what else? UI, UX research. So yeah, so making sure it's not just for geeky boys, but making sure it's touching on the different types of students who are present in your classroom. Awesome. Thank y'all.
Both seem teacher centric. Yeah.
Yeah.
Harlan makes a point. Both do seem, there are no pods or anything, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
I always had mine just set up and things.
All right, awesome.
All right.
Tonya's going to go ahead and kick off this this next section.
So as we're looking at taking the corporate lessons and looking at how they parlay into the classroom, so one of the recommendations or some of the best practices that have been identified, we're using multiple practices and measures. And so one of the things that we instruct in our training and then with our volunteers and our teachers is we want to utilize inclusive instruction, we want to use differentiated instruction, and culturally responsive teaching practices, if you will. And so those give you a variety of ways to meet student needs and to, and that's one of the things that we've been tasked with in education, at least for well over a decade since I started teaching at the high school level, is that we're to meet students where they are. And so if we are to meet students where they are, then we need to provide a variety of instructional tools and techniques in our practice of teaching. One of the ones I'll hit on is the WISE feedback. And when we talk about WISE feedback, we're really looking at things that are, we want to give students, make sure that they realize that we do have high standards in our class. And so we want to underscore that. Computer science, often students think of it as hard. And we want them to know that it is challenging and that there are skills that they will have to develop and grow to, but they are attainable. So we do have high standards, but we also want to simultaneously assure them that they can achieve those high standards. And so as we're giving students feedback, we want to make sure that we encourage them in that regard so that they're not feeling deflated and that they don't have a sense of inability to attain the skill. And we also want to make sure that we give them actionable steps. So we don't just want to put the red X on it. We want to give them options on ways that they can improve on the problem, if you will. And so that's just one way of doing inclusive instruction. Of course, we can do different curriculum adaptations that we do for students with IEPs, and there are a whole slew of tools that we have in that regard. In differentiated instruction, what we like to emphasize is that it's not just more work, right? We want students to adopt a growth mindset. And so if you've got a kid that's constantly finishing ahead of the class, instead of just giving him more of the same problems, maybe you want to challenge them to see if we can make our code more elegant and more efficient, right? So can we do it in fewer lines of code? So you want to increase the rigor and not just increase on the types of activities. Some of us, and I'll date myself, you know, from those worksheets that we used to have in our elementary, secondary experience, and then you just get like 5 more. Well, that's not compelling, right? It's like you want to encourage them to think deeper and maybe even broader in some things. So we wanted to add value to the student experience and encourage and foster, like in Carol Dweck's book, a growth mindset, if you will. So we want them to continue to always add to their toolkit and add to their skills. And then culturally responsive teaching. There are part of the reasons why we encourage our teachers and our volunteers to understand their own perspectives and know their demographics is so we can begin to identify potential bias, right? And so we all have different biases that we bring to the table. Our own perspective, because we have lived life the way we have our own individual ideas on how things should be and what things are. And we have implicit bias. There are all types of unconscious biases that we have. And so as we begin to discover those, then that can inform how we interact with our students, right? And so little Johnny, if we understand some of the things that might have occurred in little Johnny's home, we may be less apt to send them to the principal's office for certain types of activities. And we go through some of those when we do our training. But one of the other elements of culturally responsive teaching is that students are more motivated, if you will, to learn. So I would give assignments and I would give choice, right? So if I assign your final project in your Scratch, for our Scratch unit, it's like you could do your choice. You could write your own game. You could do your own, I had another assignment where you do your own nursery rhyme, but you decide what you want to do. And it's not just me giving you the Pokemon lab to do. And so those are the types of things that we want to teachers to begin implementing in their classrooms. And so there's a ton of research and a ton of materials on culturally responsive teaching that are out there as well. We've got a handout and we'll share more about that at the end. But, and Alan mentioned in his talk this morning that something, you know, you might not always be able to allow students to rap. Now I would, when we were doing vocab games, we could do a bunch of different varieties of things. But when you're doing code, it is kind of a little narrower, if you will. But outside of the actual CS content, you can take some time to engage in interactive, culturally responsive activities. And there's a whole series of Flipgrid activities. It's like 37 of them that are out there, and we provided a link to that resource that you can take a break. So maybe on Fridays, or if you have what we call culture days built into your class schedule, you can play some of those kind of engaging activities. So there are all kinds of ways that we can implement culturally responsive teaching.
On that point, so I don't know if everyone on the chat, if you all, if you all are familiar with Christopher Emdin.
Yes.
He's super amazing. He's super well versed in like culturally relevant like pedagogy, and he touches on, so if students are listening to a specific song all the time, they're always rapping the lyrics. He takes those exact lyrics and breaks it down based on whichever science course he's teaching, right? So if someone's talking about their chain, it's like, oh, okay, let's go to the periodic table. Like, what exactly is he referencing? You can do the same thing in computer science, right? All right, this beat that's being made, do you all know what software is being used? What type of technology they're using? Who's behind the scenes making this, right? So allowing them to tap deeper. Another thing I would pair culturally responsive teaching with would be trauma-informed teaching, right? So where you are really understanding the manner in which you're engaging with the student based on whether it's like, hey, we're in a pandemic, or as the kids say, a panoramic. So really tapping into what's going on a global scale, community scale, as Tonya mentioned, in their household, and really using that to adapt how you're teaching to that student, or customizing or personalizing the learning experience for them. Oh, Christopher Emdin, yes, I would definitely.
Okay, there we go. This was going to be an activity, but we're not going to do it. So, but anyway, we give our opportunities to kind of practice. It's like, think about the feedback that you give and how you can expand it. And so some of those, if you access our materials, you know, when Dan makes them available, then we've got some examples of things in the notes and that you'll be able to do better. So looking at the leader's impact. So from a corporate perspective, and if you notice, and we've not been addressing the little graphics in the middle, because we're really just showing those to kind of relate them to the classroom. But one of the big things that is prevalent in corporate America is that it has to be bought in. The concept of diversity and inclusion has to be supported, endorsed, and lived out and modeled by the leadership, right? The board members, the C-suite, the CEO. So obviously this past 2020 has, diversity and inclusion obviously is not new, it's been around, right? But 2020 seemed to magnify it and place it onto the world stage. in ways that it never has been before. And so we have seen companies reacting in many different ways and coming up and instituting policies, et cetera, et cetera. Microsoft is no different. Our CEO in July of last year published a huge blog. We probably should have given that, but outlining Microsoft's commitment to diversity and inclusion. And one of those elements is that impacts our program in particular is that we are going to intentionally engage and support African-American schools, adding 620 by the year 2025. And so leadership buy-in or leaders, CEOs leading the way is critical to success of programs and to employees actually feeling like they can walk in that space and they know that it will be rewarded. And so likewise in the classroom or in the educational setting, we want to think that our superintendents, our building principals are all on board and supporting us in this regard. And I don't think you could find anybody who would not say that they were. So we just want to point that out here. But some of the things that they can impact at a district-wide level are some of the policies, right, that you have instituted for your district. So the hiring practices, they mentioned Alan in his discussion this morning talked about providing a cohort of training for computer science teachers of color, right? So that we could have more computer science teachers to go into schools, specifically where the students and the teachers look alike. And one of the things in the demographic, if you look at your school report card, you can kind of see if your student demographic is reflected in your faculty. And so policies that the district can implement for hiring practices and encouraging principals to find faculty and teachers that are in line with the demographics of their campus. We can also have district-wide coordination of extracurricular activities. I like to use Shayna Glass here in the Houston metro area has implemented like a district-wide Girls Who Code community, if you will. And so they had to shift in the pandemic, but they shifted and they've been able to go on. And so what it does, it removes the burden of having to figure out where, when, why, how, those all those individual decisions that have to be made. If you can get district level support, then it's facilitated and teachers are more easily able to implement some of the ideas. So if it's robotics clubs or competitions, hackathons, anything like that, that you can get the district level to support you on, it just makes it easier for individual campuses and teachers to participate. At the campus level, making sure that they're supportive of the field trips, of bringing speakers in, of making the process for starting clubs easy. So if you gotta wait, it's like you can only have a club if you put the request in July of the year before the school, all those types of barriers. Building principals can eliminate those. They can reach out and have community groups come in and support the campus in general. And so we want to see that happen at the building level. Of course, and then teachers within their own classrooms can bring in speakers, use any type of collaborative structures that would foster a sense of community that elevates or that makes everybody feel included. Early on in my, when I switched over to computer science, I went to a workshop at the CSTA National Conference. It was on Kagan cooperative structures, using collaborative learning techniques using Kagan structures for the CS classroom. And I got all of these, well, I got a grant to do it later, but I got all of these tools and resources and to take those Kagan tools and bring them to the CS class. And so as a teacher, I can do that in my own space.
No. Go ahead. I was agreeing. Yeah, speaking of that, Karen, like you should be in an innovation hub. I think we should create an innovation hub for educators. These are really great points that you're bringing up. Number one, yes, it should be a consistent effort, right? And you should have more than one person focused on this. And when I think about like the hands-on learning, like making sure this isn't just one awareness training at the beginning of the year, but how do we make sure that like every month we have dedicated staff members who would be doing the work, whether that be a combination of central office and local campuses or folks in the community, but like, yes, like this is definitely like an ecosystem of sorts. And then yeah, like corporations, if they are occupying our neighborhoods, our communities, they too should be a part of the solution. So yeah, the work that Shane is doing with getting funding and partnerships with different corporations, I think that definitely should be a scaled effort with all different types of districts, no matter what city you're in. So I definitely agree with that point. And hopefully this year will bring more participation where you see companies like Microsoft working with local school leaders, and there are other businesses that are coming into the neighborhoods, but making sure they're also well versed into the communities that they're coming into, right? So with the funding comes the responsibility of them really supporting the community for long term. So awesome.
Oops. You know what? I just 12:15, 12:52. Oh, okay. So we're going to go quickly because we're actually pretty much done. So we're not going to do this activity. Obviously, there are some things that you could think about, different types of instruction, and we'll go fast through that. Yada yada yada. Okay. All right. And the last thing, recognizing the connection between innovation and diversity and inclusion. So in a corporate environment, all the more voices that come together, and Alan spoke on this too, I swear it wasn't a plant, but is that, you know, you'll get more ideas. And the thing, if you focus on elevating diversity and inclusion within a district or within a school, you'll get higher student achievement across the board. So nomination programs, I just want to hit upon that. There are plenty of research studies done that indicate that third grade reading level gives an indicator of future success. And so We Teach CS they've got a ton of research stats that support all of those points. The fact that fifth graders who are scoring at the 80th percentile in fifth grade, right? And there are so many minorities, say maybe 20% are there. By the time they get to the algebra class in 8th grade, that number, only maybe 5% of those 20% are actually in that algebra class. So there are things that we can do to systemically make sure that student performance, starting at those foundational levels, are being tracked and maintained, or that they can retain those and grow those skills so that they can stay on track to be in algebra in 8th grade, so they can hit those more rigorous classes in high school. A computational thinking challenge at a lower grade in similar fashion to the PSAT, how the PSAT does, you know, it's that scholarship competition at the junior year, and it's supposed to level out. We can do the same type of computational thinking challenge at some point prior to high school when it's time for those students to elect their pathways. So in Texas, they have to elect pathways for high school in 8th grade. And if we can get them engaged early and maybe just do some pre-identification to make sure that we support those students in that regard, then we can impact that a little bit further. I share a story about this in a district that my kids attended, and where I taught. They would give it to, if they would take the PSAT scores from the 10th graders, and if you scored a certain score, you were invited to a special district-wide special class on national merit. It was a national merit prep class, so that by the time you got to your junior year, you were ready. And so you could see the disparity across the board on where the merit scholars were in our district. but there was some pre-stuff that was done, and there was some assistance given to get them over the edge. They're on that bubble, right? And so in like manner, we can do the same thing with students in the computer science class. So all of those other things, creating community, we can talk about that, doing clubs and all that creates a sense of community, and we are coming it up. So this is it. We're near the end. We are at the end. So we aligned the lessons learned. I think I took this over, Marilyn. This is just right. I'm sorry.
I'm either way.
I just wanted to make sure we did. Yeah.
I know we're approaching time, but I really want to thank everyone for just tuning in and learning a little bit of our perspective when it relates to social justice, especially in the classroom and in various school districts. But yeah, so these are just a few points we hope that you carry along with you as you go about this weekend and you work on tackling this semester. So yeah, if you have any questions about these different components, or if you would like to talk more offline, whether that's about the TILS program or just in general about social justice as it relates to computer science, we are happy and available. I'll go ahead and add our contact to the chat. But yeah, open for any questions that you all may have.
And we hope you were able, we didn't get to really do the activities and talk as much about them as we kind of wanted to, because we wanted you guys to kind of share back, but it didn't work out. But anyway, any three concrete actions, or even one, that you can take back and implement in your classroom or at your district level, whatever role you have an opportunity to make a difference. And so we hope you can find one thing.
It was nice to meet everyone.
And our little handout, so just some of the resources that we've provided are available. Oh, I have let me put the AKA in this. I hope this works.
And the aka.ms is just a short URL.
Yeah, it's like our tiny URL. It's like 11 different things. It's a lot. But those are all tools that we utilize when we support our schools in impacting their areas.
Awesome. Well, if there aren't any other questions, we hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference and hope to hopefully hear from y'all soon.